Hello everybody, I'm back again. This is Jason's Disturbing Experiences, episode 1.9, and this is the running into people again experience. Actually I have the light on this morning. Sometimes in these videos I don't have the light on. It seems like it's very bright. It is 7:13 a.m. on Friday, the 7th of January, 2022. So it's a new year. Not sure how many of these particular episodes of this show I'm going to continually do. So this may be the last one, I don't know. But I wanted to start the episode off with explaining why I'm going to do it. I'm doing this episode because we all run into people from time to time again. Like let's say I went to the gas station. I might run into a guy or a girl or somebody I know from 20 years ago. And I'm like, hey, I come home, I'm like, hey, I ran into Bill Tornsock at the gas station. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. And I was just talking about him a week ago. That's like a strange coincidence, right? You mentioned him and you ran into him. Now, what happens if you run into somebody 1,000 miles away from here? That's weird. Now that's twice as weird as running into them in your own neighborhood. And that's what I'm going to discuss today. Why I have this on my head, this meat chopping utensil? Because this episode is a mind splitting episode. It's going to blow your mind. This show today is going to go way, way back. I'm going to go all the way back like I have in the past. I'm going to bring up some familiar places that I've discussed before. I don't know if I've mentioned Fort Campbell before. I'm going to mention that. I'm going to mention Indiana. I'm going to mention Rhode Island again and some other states. Okay, on this episode, I'm going to start off with, I went to basic training 30 years ago, give or take. 30 years ago, 1992. Now, before I left for basic training, you have to enlist in the military. I had a friend of mine, his name was Sean, that I went to junior high with. And when I went to junior high and high school, sorry about that. When I went to junior high and high school, my junior high went 7, 8, 9, and my high school went 10, 11, 12, as did the other school where my friend Sean went. So I didn't see Sean after that. We kind of lost touch. Did 7, 8, 9 together. You know, we didn't really hang out much, but we were like friends at school, give or take, hung out every blue moon. If we ran into other friends or we were all together, we hung out, stuff like that. So I didn't see Sean until I joined the military. So here it is, like May or April, actually, of 1992, and I'm at the recruiting office, which isn't far from where I live right now, and Sean's in there. And I'm like, hey, Sean, what's going on? I said, you're joining the military? He's like, yeah. So I went into the field artillery, and he went into what's called air defense artillery, or actually he was MLRS. It's multiple launch rocket systems. It's like this big giant box with rockets in it that they fire, all computerized. He was like in the more technical side of the artillery, and I was in the more grunt side of the artillery, if you're to describe the two. So it was so cool. I run into Sean there, hadn't seen him in all these years. So now this is April. I don't leave till August, right, to go to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for basic and artillery school. It's like a 16-week training that you do down there to, get certified as a soldier, so to speak, for those of you that aren't in the military. So I'm down there, and I'm like in my first week, and you get your head shaved, similar to what I do now, except I have to do it now because all my hair fell out, and I have to shave my head and make it look not like a bird's nest. So I'm down there, and I'm sitting there eating my breakfast, right? And you got drill sergeants walking around trying to get you to, hurry up and get things done. And I hear, psst, Tavares, hey, Jason. I look to my right, and there's Sean. He's like, what are we doing? Like he had just this, this look on his face. We're kids, We're like 17, 18 years old. And I was like, I don't know, man, I don't know, like that. And then that was it. I hadn't seen him the rest of the time because we weren't in the same unit. He was, somewhere else and this and that. And then, he went on to the MLRS course, I think, and I went on to artillery school, and then to my unit, and he went on to his unit after that. So it was so weird because I see Sean there, hadn't seen him in all these years, ran into him at the recruiting office, run into him in basic, which is odd because we're in the mess hall, which is the, eating area. And then I run into him in 1996, I think it was. I'm back in Rhode Island, I'm out of the military, and I'm going up the ramp of school. I came home to do one semester before moving out to Indiana, where I was heading to. And I'm going up the ramp, and he's going up the ramp, and we're right there. And I'm like, Sean, and he's like, hey, Jay. So we're talking, and he said, oh yeah, I was in Germany. And I said, oh, cool. I said, I ended up at Fort Campbell after we saw each other for like 2 seconds in Oklahoma. And I said, yeah, I did my time at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. He did his in Germany. And I said, so, what are you doing now, and this and that. Now, I don't see Sean again after that. I do my semester, didn't see him one whole time that entire semester. We didn't exchange numbers or anything, it was just one of those things. So now this is like late 95, 96. Then, living in Indiana, and I come home, and my mom was a nurse's aide back then, and she got out of work at like 11, all these years ago. So when I came home on vacation, I used to borrow her car while I was home. I was home for like 10 days a year, give or take, sometimes a little more. And I'd borrow a car and pick her up at work and things like that. So I picked her up this one particular night, and she goes, oh, you know something, there's a young guy that works here as a security guard. And he kind of does it while he's in college. So I assume at that point, Sean was like in his bachelor's degree or grad school or something like that. And I said, oh, what's his name? She goes, Sean. And, he was a military guy and, just like you. And I was like, really? Sean? And I said his last name. And she goes, yeah, that's him. She goes, kind of a thin guy, brown hair. And so a couple of days later, before I left, I stop in there, and sure enough, it's Sean. And, we're talking, and he goes, oh, man, it's so cool. So we kept running into each other all this time. And I just found it odd. I mean, like, what are the chances you're going to go up to the ramp at the same time? We were in totally different classes, never would have saw each other. Saw each other at the recruiting office, ran into each other in Oklahoma for that brief, period of a couple minutes while we ate that breakfast. Ran into each other again years and years later. This is like 1999 probably now, running into each other. And he's of all the places to work, he's got a part-time gig where my mom works. And I was like, that's so strange. Now, I had a lot of instances like this. That was just one. Now, we're talking there from 92 to 99. Now, let's go back to like 1993. I'm at a school at Fort Campbell called Air Assault School. And at the school, I met a guy in the course, and his last name was Hand. If you can see this rubber hand here. Wasn't an actual hand. His last name was Hand. So I'm at between class you have breaks. People go on smoke breaks. I think it's like a 10-minute smoke break at the end of every hour, a 5-minute smoke break, whatever it was. So we had like a little gravel area where people did that, and other people that weren't smoking were able to, just go there and kind of talk for a couple minutes, collect themselves to get a rest from class. So I'm talking to a couple of soldiers there, and I turn around, there's a guy, and his last name's Hand. And I said, that's an interesting name. I've never, seen that name before. And he goes, oh, Tavares. He goes, that's a strange name too. And when he heard my accent, he goes, oh, where are you from? Are you from like New England or something? And I said, yeah, I'm from Rhode Island. And he goes, when he was in basic training, he goes, I was in basic training with a guy who was also from Rhode Island, and his name was Carlos. And I said, oh, cool, like that. And I said, and I just joking, I said, thin guy, little shorter than me, blonde hair. He goes, yeah, and he said his last name. And I was like, oh man, so I guess they were friends, but he was from somewhere else. Carlos was from, my classes in school. We went to high school together. And I didn't even know he had joined the military. And he's met this guy, and they were friends, and then he recognized, he caught my name, thought my name was interesting. I noticed his name. And between the accent, he brings up a guy that I went to high school with just, a few months prior. We graduated, you figure, like May or June, and then, the next year you're in, I went to basic training, and then that following New Year, I'm in this air assault school in Kentucky, to get qualified to get air assault wings. But I just thought that was kind of cool. And I said, of all the people in me, a guy turns around, he knows a guy that was in my history class and a bunch of my other classes. Now, another odd occurrence that I had, which I'm going to backtrack a little bit again, when I came home from basic training, back then you came home in what's called your Class A's. It's a green dress uniform that you see the guys back then and the girls with the pointed hats and things like that. And a lot of people wore them home because, you did something big, you get out of high school, you just went to basic training and AIT, which is Advanced Individual Training, and, for your job, and my job was the artillery that I mentioned, that's your MOS, Military Occupational Specialty in the military. So I'm walking through the Chicago airport. I got my duffel bag, and I'm, up at the counter. I check in, and I had this guy there. He started a conversation with me. He was like 25 to 28 years old. Excuse me for a second. 25, 28 years old, give or take. And, we're just doing small talk. He's telling me that, oh yeah, he goes, how old are you? Would you join for? Da, da, da. It's cool that you joined, and congratulations. And I say, yeah, I'm heading home, and then I'm being stationed at Fort Campbell, so I'm only going home on vacation, then I'm going right to active duty. And he goes, oh, it's cool, man. He goes, yeah, I'm getting married soon. Da, da. It was just small talk, everybody being friendly around the holiday. This is in 1992. In 2002, I had already been living in Indiana now for about 6.5, 7 years. I'm at the same, this is no joke, I'm at the same airport, Chicago O'Hare, not in a uniform, at the counter, talking to the lady at the counter, and I happened to look to my left, and I looked again, and there's a guy sitting over there, and I was like, where do I know this guy? It was him. He was a little heavier, 10 years older, so if he was 25 then, he's like 35 to 38 years old now. And I got my stuff all checked in, and I walked over, and I asked him, I didn't know what to say. I was like, hey, I said, how was the wedding? I said to him, and he goes, how was the wedding? He goes, do I know you? He, was a little concerned. And I said, I don't know. I said, you and I had a conversation about 10 years ago. I was just a kid coming home from basic, walking through the airport. I had a green uniform on and a duffel bag. And the guy looked at me, he goes, I remember you. I remember you. And he goes, you remembered me? He goes, wait, how did you recognize me? He goes, that's been 10 years, dude. He goes, we talked for like 5 minutes. And I said, I was up at the counter. I looked to my left, and you were basically almost sitting, a different airport terminal, but you were basically sitting in the same spot. Like there's a row of seats, you were in the middle. And when I walked over to sit down last time, remember it was a crowded airport back then, you were sitting in the middle. And remember he had his legs a certain way, like crossed while he was reading. And it was crossed while he was reading. I guess when I looked, I noticed the legs being crossed. I saw the magazine position or whatever. And I looked at his face. I said, damn, that's the same guy. So we were talking and laughing and this and that. And I told him, after the conversation, I said, well, I'm going to go sit over there or whatever. And I say, I'll see you in 10 years. And everyone around us is laughing. So it's really funny. It's like, wow, you got a good memory and da-da-da. And the good memory part doesn't tie in well with my last episode of Jason's Disturbing Experiences, which was the memorization or lack thereof episode, which describes how I have a bad memory for testing and things like that. But for like faces and things of that nature and things that people say, like if you told me something, I may be able to regurgitate it in 20 years, even though you only said it once. Because I guess conversations with people and like face-to-face interaction, I remember much more deeply than, having to sit in a class that you sometimes don't want to be in, trying to regurgitate material that, is being force-fed to you in many cases. So, I told the guy, hey, I'll see you in 10 years after that. And he's laughing. He goes, all right, buddy, I'll see you in 10 years. Never saw him again. But the odds of running into a complete stranger 10 years later like that it's remarkable to look and see this person. You're like, wow, I remember that guy. And you go up and you could actually hit it off and have a conversation. It was so crazy. Excuse me. Now, I've had other instances. I worked in a military pay office in Indiana for about 2 years, maybe a little over. And then I went on Homeland Security after that. And I think that time frame was right around the time I run into this guy. So I'm working there. I'm not going to say people's last names. Let's call the guy John. And he was an officer. Let's call him Major John. Really cool guy. And he ran that pay office. And he was a major, which is a pretty high-ranking military officer. And at the time, I was an E6, which is a staff sergeant, in that office. But I still was in a unit as well. But my full-time job was at that office for those 2.5 years until Homeland Security kicked off, and then I went on that. Now, I had this major in my office, really cool guy, kind of talked like this, always had his hands on. He goes, hey, how you doing today? He goes, we're working on physical fitness. He had that kind of a voice. Or if his hands weren't here, it was one hand on a coffee cup with one hand here with a fist. But he always made me laugh. Always had a good personality and stuff. Here it is now in the future. Now, I left Indiana in like October of 2002. Now, I'm now in the Rhode Island National Guard. It's 2006, and I'm away at a school in Arkansas called ANOC. It's Advanced Non-Commissioned Officer course. So it's like a 2-week course. I think it was 2 weeks in one place and 2 weeks somewhere else. My second 2 weeks was there. It's the day before the final test, and we got a whole table, long table full of soldiers, all, comparing notes and things like that before the big exam the next day, because you took the exam and then graduated and flew home that day, which would be the following day. So we're all done studying, and in the military, you tab your books. Today they use a lot of computer resources for things like that, but you have like a plastic tub with all your manuals, and for the exam, they let you use the books because the questions are so varying, from all different things. So you have tabs in your books. So, we're tabbing stuff that's needed to be tabbed in order to find the answers on the exam the next day, because the tests were more based on your familiarity to see if you knew where to find the answers rather than memorization. Because if you do it enough, you're going to memorize stuff regardless. Now, we're at the point where we're just sitting there all joking and, drinking sodas and stuff and telling stories. I started talking about this pay office from like 5 years before. And I'm talking about the major. I said, he was a nice guy, and we laughed, and he was pretty lenient, and there was a gym down the hall, and it was cool to get an experience like that because it was so different than the field artillery. And at that point, I was in, recruiting, so recruiting was different than everything. So it's nice to have all the different job experiences through the service because there's so many of them. So I'm talking about this guy. Met him in Indiana. Never had an email, never talked to him after I left that pay office job. Living in Rhode Island like the last 5 years, going to school in Arkansas for this school, talking about the guy, and he walks right by the table. That's strange. And I said, as I'm talking, I said, hold on, everybody. I said, and there he is. And he comes over, I said, hey, sir. And he goes, well, there, Sergeant Tavares, what are you doing here? And everyone's like this. That's like, that's the officer that you're speaking of? And I explained to him, I said, hey, sir, I was just talking about you, in a positive way. He goes, it better been positive. And, he was joking around. And he goes, I haven't seen you since you were a staff sergeant in Indiana. And I said, yeah, hopefully we all pass our exams tomorrow, and I'll be, sergeant first class. And he goes, that's awesome. So after the small talk, and he, congratulated everybody and, wished them success on their course, he walks off. He had a big coffee cup, big plastic cup. He walks off. And I just looked at everybody, and they're like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. You haven't seen this guy in 5 years. You don't talk to him. You don't email him. You knew him in another state. You mention him, and he walks by the table. That's really, really, really weird. To me, at least. I found it very, very strange. Now, I've had other instances since then. I'm trying to think of which one I wanted to tell you guys about, because I don't want to, talk too much on this topic and, wear out my welcome and have you guys not finish watching the video. But I had those right there, and then I had, what was the other one I wanted to tell you about? Come on, think. I had one where ran into somebody else somewhere. Oh yeah, when I lived in Iowa. I lived in Iowa with the military from 2014 to 2015. And while I was out there, I had a small surgery on top of my head. I had a little cyst removed. Well, I had a big gauze on my head. And I'm going to Walmart right afterwards just to pick up some things because I was going to be off the next day because, the thing was bleeding and this and that. And I had to change the gauze and so on and so forth. There was a soldier in the Rhode Island Guard that I used to see at a motor pool. And a motor pool is a place where you keep military vehicles, which wasn't too far away from my girlfriend's apartment at the time. So, if I opened up her blinds or I'm in her driveway, if the guys were out there, I said, I know that guy. I didn't know him, but I knew of him. Like we've had small talk is what I mean. I'm all the way out in Iowa, and I bumped shoulders with the guy at the Walmart. And I was kind of groggy from the surgery. They shouldn't have let me walk out of there, even though it was such a small incision. But I guess I lost a great deal of blood because, on top of your head, you bleed fairly easily or, profusely at times. So, they kind of just wanted to clean it up and get it going. So, I drove home, which I probably shouldn't have by myself. Went home, went to Walmart to get some food so I wouldn't have to leave my apartment that I had out there during that time. And I'm there and I bump into him. And I was like, hey, and he goes, oh, hey, man. I said, what are you doing here? He goes, duh, military training. He gave me like some kind of an attitude, which I didn't understand. Well, I didn't really want to hear it at that point. I was a little sick to my stomach. I had the gauze on top of my head, got what I needed, and, drove the rest of the way home, which wasn't very far. But the odds of seeing somebody when not long before that, you're, in Rhode Island or whatever, and you're looking at the person in the motor pool doing work, and then you run into them like, driving miles, 1,300 miles away, you literally bump shoulders with them. Now, the bumping shoulder thing has happened to me again. Let's go forward to 2010. or 2009, 10, or 11, one of those years. I am a recruiter now, back in Rhode Island, still a recruiter because I was a recruiter in the Arkansas portion of the story. I'm a recruiter. I get assigned to a new school. I decided to call, the teachers, and, go in there and speak to the teachers. So I said, hey, a good thing to do would be to, teach gym classes for a day. It's a lot of stuff that recruiters do to kind of get FaceTime with the students. That way the students are more comfortable with, asking you questions regarding their, future careers in the military. So, the gym teachers always like you to, teach a class for a day. So you teach every gym class for that day, each period, probably the same kind of, training that you would do, throughout. So let's say you were doing, calisthenics for that day. You'd be teaching calisthenics for every gym class for that day. And then the students, if they would like, can, get a business card from you for them and their families or, parents to contact you if they have questions. So I didn't get to meet the gym teacher that day. We spoke on the phone, and this is prior to the weekend. She told me, I'm going to be gone. It's nice to talk to you. I'm going to be gone until Tuesday. I'm going to New York. Well, I was leaving for New York that Friday. A friend of mine had come up from Florida, and we were going out to Long Island, getting some of his friends, and then going to the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building. Well, of all the people in New York, right, I'm coming into the Statue of Liberty. She's coming out. Now, I haven't met this gym teacher yet. Now, this is the weekend, either the Saturday or the Sunday. I don't exactly remember. I bumped shoulders with this lady, and we both look at each other, go, excuse me. And I looked at her shirt. She had like a zip-up jacket. And I said, hey, are you a teacher at that school? I said, I'm going to be a recruiter there soon. She goes, Jason? And her eyes were like this. And I was like, yeah. And I said, Mrs., so-and-so, whatever her name was, I can't remember. And she's like, yeah. And then she said her first name, and her friend was with her. And she goes, that's the recruiter that you're going to be meeting when we get back on Tuesday? And we're like all looking at each other. My friend's laughing. He goes, what are the chances of you guys bumping into each other? I'm like, yeah, like that. And if I hadn't seen the school name, I never would have, questioned it. But it was mind-blowing. I said, I'll see you on Tuesday. She goes, all right, I'll see you on Tuesday. And I walked off. I was like, what the heck? I mean, that is like, what are the odds? I mean, between running into people out of state, that's different, like, 1,300 miles away in Iowa. But you talk to somebody on the phone, you establish you're both going to be in New York. You're not meeting each other in New York. You don't know each other. And you're coming out of the Empire State Building, and you bump shoulders and notice the name of the school. That was crazy. So we had a really good laugh about that. Now I have one more experience. Excuse me again for 1 second. And this one is a strange experience because of a phone call. I have other creepy phone call stories, but this isn't a creepy one because I've been called by a dead family member once, which I'm not going to discuss right now. If anyone wants to hear that story, maybe I'll do it in a future episode if I decide to do a future episode. But right now, I don't remember the date, and my buddy Nick, who I know is going to watch this, he knows the date. I can't remember the date, but let's just say it's 2007 or 8. We're in the car, he's driving, his girlfriend's in the back seat, I'm in the passenger seat, and they came up from out of state where they live, and we're driving to Salem for that Halloween. They hadn't been to Salem in years. He's originally from here, so he goes, hey, you want to go to Salem? I said, yeah, it'd be awesome. We're driving to Salem, just talking about this and that, and military, because we're in the military together, talk about military, and, da-da-da. And he asked me, because he knows I've talked about this person a lot in my life, he goes, hey, you ever still talk to your teacher, Bob, from Indiana? Excuse me, it was from my associate's degree. I had this really fun teacher, man. This guy was hilarious. It made the school experience just a great time. Like, you can look back on college and just have a lot of laughs because the guy was just interacting with the students really well. And he was just a fun guy, just a really awesome person. We're still friends today. It's been 23 years I've known the guy. So at that point, I hadn't talked to him much. I said, I was out there in like 2002 or 2001. And, me and a couple of the guys, met out, I flew out to Indiana. We went to the school, stopped by while we were out there. And, we touched base with him and got to see him. I said, but I haven't really talked to him much. Now, we're in the car, and my friend Nick the Viking, that's his nickname, Nick the Viking, he asks me that question, and my phone rings. I remember I had a BlackBerry then. And I pick up my BlackBerry. It's a 317 area code. I'm like, hello? And it's Bob. And he goes, oh, hey, man, what's going on? I said, Bob? And Nick goes, "Your teacher?" And he's looking at me like this while he's driving. And his girlfriend goes, "It's your teacher?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Hey, Bob," I said, "I'm on my way up to Salem with a few friends, and my buddy who's driving just mentioned, do you ever talk to Bob anymore?" And Bob says, "That is strange, isn't it?" Now, he didn't mean to be creepy or eerie, but it was just the delivery of how he said it. He goes, "That is creepy, isn't it?" So I'm like, "Yeah," and they're both, he's still driving and he's looking over and she's in the back seat like. So I talked to Bob for a couple minutes and I said, "I'll call you next week or whatever." And he goes, "Oh man, that's cool." He goes, "I hope you have a good time." I said, "Great hearing from you and everything." And I, stopped the call and I look over at Nick and he's like, "That is crazy." And I said, "It is crazy. I mean, you haven't talked to somebody in years and you mention them and the phone rings." Now, a lot of these stories that I just told, people may say, "Oh, geez, that happens to everybody." It really doesn't happen to everybody when you're 1,300 miles away, or you just met somebody on the phone and you bump shoulders in a crowded city like New York. I mean, you know how many times you can go into the Statue of Liberty throughout the day? And if somebody was there like she was, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and coming home Tuesday, she could have gone any time or not at all. And you run into them. And it's just, it's mind-boggling that, to me, which is, the reason I used this on top of my head, if you guys recall earlier in the story, it's just it really made me think of like how small the world is. It's like, what is that, like a 1 in 380 million chance that you're gonna run into anybody that you know out of state like that. I got one more I'm gonna throw at you. Hopefully this doesn't exceed 30 minutes because I know it's gonna go to another file and it'll have to be spliced together and I don't want to do that. But I had my friend Nick, the guy I just mentioned again, he lives out of state, and I guess my book, my first book, The Shadow Inside, was mentioned down there. And there was a nurse, I think she was a nurse, this is back in like 2008 story too, a nurse or somebody like that who knew me. And they were like, "What?" Like that. And she goes, "Yeah, I know Jason." She knew me, I guess, when they mentioned my book. Or there was something like that tied in. And I'm thinking of all the people, and this was a stranger they were talking to. It's not somebody they actually knew. It was just in conversation, and she knew me. And I still don't know who she is. And I'm like, wow, that is weird. And they live about 800 miles away, 800 to 900 miles away. So it's just things like that, and I thought it was interesting to bring it up with all the, the similarities and, just running into somebody just out of the blue. It's not like you're here in Rhode Island, where it's a 36 by 48 mile state, and you not only know people around town that you may see 2-3 times a month, this, or somebody that I went to high school with them and I ran into. This is 1,000 miles away, and when you run into them, it's just weird. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I recently put out a film called Right Seat Ride. It came out, I don't know, like December, before Christmas, December 20th to 21st. Pretty cool 7-minute short film. Stay tuned in April, between the 1st and the 15th. I got another film called Phoebe Stimming's Vicious Scribblings, and that'll be really cool. And then I'm going to post this today, which is Friday, January 7th, 2022. I hope you guys had a great Christmas, great New Year, and I hope 2022 is better for everybody, and the people get along and stop being as ridiculous as they are with the horrible news I see and this and that, and everybody just has a good year, has a better year, and gets things done and is better toward one another. So I will hopefully see you guys soon. If not on this show, maybe a new show, but definitely another movie, because I do 4 short films a year. If you ever want to be in a film, my email is jbnimbelJBQUICK@cox.net. It's jbnimble, jbquick@cox.net, and nimble is spelt wrong on purpose because I couldn't use it because I guess somebody else had taken it at the time when I established the email like 13 or 14 years ago. I'll see you guys.